Our message is entitled Honesty in Trade, which is the second thought that we have. And we would consider, firstly, the striving men from verse 11 to 12, striving men. Immediately following the Levirate law, which assisted the widow and womanhood so much, we are given a law which would discourage the wife from being a third party to the possible death of a husband, which in turn would demand the interposing of the Levirate law. Now, remember last time we were studying the Levirate law. What was it for? Well, it was to help the widow. It was to help womanhood when they were alone, they were single, or they were without the help of the husband. That's where they are vulnerable. And the Levirate law allows them to enable them to be married through the help that is given out through the next of kin who would be willing to allow the family to carry on their line through a kind brother. Well, here is a different picture. Here we see that it was a situation where there was a strife between her husband and another person. And here the law that is given was that she was not to take advantage of such an opportunity to deepen the anger against her husband by striving as well as increase the spirit against her for interfering in the matter. What was she doing? Well, she was going out as an aggressor against the person who is striving against the husband, and did something that was untoward. The sense here stated simply that the wife was not to assist her husband in this personal conflict between him and his foal by taking hold of the secrets, that's the word mebushim, the parts of shame or the groin, which is certainly of the most vulnerable parts of a man by which to injure him. So if the wife attacked the other man in that manner, she was to have her hand cut off. This, as we have implied, was not only the most vulnerable part of a man, which would reduce the manly man to beneath the woman, but it was an insult to the womanhood by touching such private parts of man himself. This was to be so, pity or sentiment allowed in mercy, or we said that there should be no pity or sentiment allowed in mercy to that woman. Here is that aspect of the law that is highlighted there to help us to understand the condition of the strife and what they are, as the wife she should and should not do. And this was the law simply stated. And then from verse 13 to 16, it is another aspect. Thou shalt not have in thy bags diverse weights, a small, a great, and a small. Thou shalt not have in thy house diverse measures, a great and a small. But thou shalt have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure shalt thou have, that thy days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. For all that do such things and all that do unrighteously are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. The weights, the word there, eben, or stone, or the measures, the ephah, were both to be accurate. Those were the instruments for measuring weight in trade. Weights were anciently made of stone, and even to this day are found in some Eastern shopkeepers. So you buy Chinese medicine, you see that they have certain weight that they use to measure what you are purchasing with a balance. The Deuteronomy view carefully enlarges upon the previous regulation given in Leviticus 19:35 to 36. It says, "Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in meter yard, in weight, or in measure, just balances, just weights, and just ephah, and a just hin ye shall have. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt." Honesty in trade as a duty to our neighbor is emphatically enforced once again. So if you have believers, or you have men who obey the law of God, who goes about to be tradesmen wherever God has sent them, then you would find that this world is a safer place, isn't it? But if you have men who use diverse weights, or men who would tamper with the weight, then you would find that the world is not such a safe place, isn't it? You go and buy your vegetable or your potato or your carrot, and you would expect that you would receive a full weight of what you have paid for your carrot or your potato to cook your meal, isn't it? Yeah. So here we are told that how important it is that such weights are good weights, because such unrighteousness, if these are weights that does not measure up, well, they are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. And when John the Baptizer began his ministry, in his preaching he also went about preaching to the publicans. These are the tax collectors in Israel, Jewish tax collectors. He said to them, "Master, what shall I do?" He said to them, "Exact no more than that which is appointed you." In other words, the tax collector were fond of exacting more than they should. And so, as we consider and think about these few verses, perhaps we can expand a little bit to help us to see this idea, this concept of honest money in the world today. Money is so much a part of our daily life, and the Bible tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil. Money itself is not evil, but the love of money is a grievous sin. Paul warns, which while some coveteth after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So you have diverse weights, dishonest trade. That's where you are coveting those things that you shouldn't. So here there is a warning to the world that is living today in the leer of a materialistic lifestyle that enslaves God's people. And we say that the covenant family is under siege. Have you ever wondered how money should be defined? It's a pertinent question in this money-abusing world that we are living in today. The Bible tells us in Genesis 3:19 that the purpose of human labor, in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat thy bread, is ordained of God, whereby man feeds and sustains himself physically till he dies. Money has been used to quantify this labor. It is a unit measure of a man's labor, whereby he could feed himself till the day he dies. Savings is accumulated or stored value of human labor, whereas debt is the obligation to serve human labor. This is the concept of honest money. The Bible teaches that man can enjoy the fruit of his labor, and that it is given to him by God, who enable him to work, and There is nothing better for a man than he should eat and drink and to enjoy, to make his soul enjoy the good of his labor. An honest trade with an honest income, you enjoy the good of your labor. And the Bible says that it is from the hand of God. And also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. So God's word tells us that every man to whom God giveth riches and wealth has given him the power to eat, to take his portion, to rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. And so in human history, to facilitate a store of human labor, money is introduced. We receive wages and remuneration for labor rendered in the form of wages. And how is wages paid? Well, in the beginning, people bartered. Barter is the exchange of goods and services for goods and services. A bag of rice for a bag of beans. However, if you didn't agree what something was worth in exchange, you didn't want what the other person had, to solve that problem, humans developed what is called commodity money. Hence, money came to be defined any circulating medium of exchange, including coins, paper money, and demand deposits. More specifically, money is anything that is commonly accepted by a group of people for the exchange of goods, services, and resources. So every country has its own system and coin and paper money. Reviewing man's history, you see that metal objects were first used 5000 BC. By 700 BC, you find that the first coins were made in the Western world. They minted their own coins, and metal was used, and this made it available, easy to work with, could be recycled, and it has certain value. The coin has a certain value. So when we talk about the weight, we talk about that the coin represented a certain value. And what are the characteristics of honest money? As a store of human labor, we talk about good weight. Well, as a stored value, it has to preserve the value for purchasing power. It has to have intrinsic value, valuable in itself. It has to be durable, cannot be corrupted, able to weather wear and tear. It's non-perishable, like perishable commodities like meat and vegetable. It's divisible, can be broken down into smaller units. Widely recognized across countries and regions, limited in supply, and it's precious. An unlimited supply will totally diminish its value. And so in the history of man, gold and silver has always been the medium of exchange. Gold is the first metal in the Garden of Eden, possibly for its shining beauty, and the ratio of silver and gold mined from the earth is about 1:16. Precious metals like gold and silver are the best forms of money in the history of mankind because they fulfill the above 7 functions. Gold supply on the average increased 1% a year in human history, and this growth will provide a stable and sustainable economic growth. So growth proportionate to the amount of gold which we can mine from the ground. The question we ask ourselves is this: why do we want to constrain our growth by constraining the supply of gold and even silver? Well, this is man's safeguard against fraud. The heart of fallen man is greedy and covetous, and man wants to find an easy way out of God's order. Genesis 3 verse 19, in the sweat of thy brow thou shalt eat thy meat. This is a fallen nature of man: covetousness, greediness, laziness. Fallen man has always been driven to create fraudulent money, and this is what we were mentioning in Genesis 25. He makes fake gold, silver coins. He printed paper money without restraint. In the history of mankind, it's observed that every paper currency does not last more than 50 years before it becomes obsolete as a result of abuse. According to the National Geographic in January 2009, entitled Gold, the True Cost of a Global Obsession, that no single element has tantalized and tormented human imagination more than the simmering matter known by the chemical symbol AU. For thousands of years, the desires to possess gold has driven people to extremes, fueling wars and conquests, from pharaohs to tin miners to financiers. And so you see that it became the bedrock of the global economy. Nevertheless, we see that in all history, only about 161 tons of gold have been mined, barely enough to fill 2 Olympic swimming pools. More than half has been extracted in the past 50 years. How is gold used? Well, in jewelry, in industry, in dental industries, in electronics, in industrial, in for investment, and so with the it's interesting that as you look at the human history, you see that with the rise of the British Empire in the 19th century and the rise of America in the 20th century, with the introduction of paper currency and non-precious coinage, commodity money evolved into what is called representative money. This meant that what money itself was made of no longer had to be very valuable. Representative money was backed by a government or a bank's promise to exchange it for a certain amount of silver and gold. For example, the gold British pound bill and the British sterling was once guaranteed to be a redeemable and for a pound of sterling silver. For the most 19th century and 20th century, the majority of currencies were based on representative money through the use of the gold standard. There's a historical development that we would like to highlight, focusing on the United States of America. From 1776 to 1933, gold growth was realistic, honest, and sustainable amidst the Great Depression, from which America emerged stronger economically speaking when representative money was introduced. So in April 5th, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed a law called Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates by U.S. citizens. It requires U.S. citizens to surrender before 1st May 1933 all but a small amount of gold coin, gold bullion, gold certificates owned by them to the Federal Reserve in exchange for paper currency. 1 troy ounce of gold is exchangeable for $20.67 US under the Trade with the Enemy Act of October 6, 1917, as amended in March 9, 1933. Violation of the order was punishable by fine of up to $10,000 and is adjusted for inflation and up to 10 years imprisonment or both. Most citizens who own large amounts of gold has transferred it to countries such as Switzerland. Henry Kissinger, well, he went home, he passed away at the age of 100, said that if you control the money supply, you control the world. He is a prominent member of the Bilderberg Group. The question which we want to ask ourselves is this: why constrain growth by gold? Governments in history have been observed to be driven by fraud and greed to print money unreservedly. Without a system of constraint, mankind is subject to instability due to his own abuse. The system of using precious metals like gold and silver has been the most secure based on 5,000 years of human history. In 1933, gold was confiscated by the state in exchange for the dollar. The dollar is as good as gold because it is backed by gold at its beginning, introducing representative money. So at the end of World War II, the rise of the United States of America as a leading nation of the world, a significant event that shaped a new world economic order in the post-World War II era is the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. Policy makers from 44 allied nations met 3 weeks in July 1944 that agreed to make the US dollar the reserve currency of the world. All other currencies will be pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar is pegged to the gold, and this began the years of steady growth, 27 years of steady growth for America as the leader of the world. Then we come to this thing called the fiat or the fraud money. Representative money has been replaced by fiat money in the last 40 years in our modern world. This is the intriguing story of deception that violates God's order for mankind given in Genesis 3 verse 19. This concept of honest money. Honest money has been replaced by dishonest money. And this came with the introduction of fiat money or fiat currency. What is fiat currency? Fiat is a Latin word that means let it be done. Money is now given value by a government, fiat or decree. In other words, enforceable legal tender laws were made. By law, the refusal of legal tender money in favor of some other form of payment is illegal. The integrity of human governments is called to question because this form of money is subjected to immense abuse when it's printed unreservedly and wantonly. Today's paper currency we are holding is not meeting the key functions of money. In terms of storage value, well, we said no. Purchasing power can be inflated away, just as what we are seeing today. Right? Your tomato costs $1, $2. Well, it goes up to $3. It goes up to $4. Today, U.S. dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power since 1971. It has no intrinsic value. It is an obligation to pay. Is it durable? No fiat currency can last more than 50 years according to what we see in human history. Is it divisible? Yes, it is divisible. Widely recognized? No, except major currencies like the US dollar, the yen, the pound. Limited in supply, can be printed without the backing of gold? No. Easy to carry? Yes. Today's fiat money, in terms of paper currency, what we are holding is not meeting the 7 functions of money that we have observed. Whatever gold and silver has been used as money in the history of mankind, or when representative money was used, there was honest and sustainable growth during that period of its use. From 1776 to 1933, since the inception of the United States of America, gold and silver has always been the medium of exchange because it fulfills the above 7 criteria of the function of money. Civilization historically has used gold and silver as a trusted medium of exchange. What happened? In August 15, 1971, the United States unilaterally terminated convertibility of the dollar to gold. This action, referred to as the Nixon shock, created the situation in which the United States dollar became the sole backing of currencies and a reserve currency for the member states. This has carried on for more than, well, we say 50 years of lawlessness. At the time of this writing was 2011, so now we are 13 years later, so 50 years. As said earlier, in the observable history of mankind, every paper currency that goes into uncontrollable printing does not last more than 50 years. We are at the tail end of this lawlessness. A day of reckoning is coming. The President of France was in Washington on the 10th of November 2010, speaking to the US Congress that the United States must stop to dump US dollars on the rest of the world, risking a global financial crisis. More than 40 years later, his predecessor, President Charles, 40 years ago, his predecessor, President Charles de Gaulle, you go to Paris, it's the de Gaulle Airport, Charles de Gaulle Airport, was successful in 1965 to demand the exchange of his dollar for real tangible assets, fiscal gold bullion at the Federal Reserve. He did not send a diplomat, but a French Navy. That was before 1971, when the US dollar was still exchangeable for gold. The United States was in the heat of the Vietnam War in 1967, Middle East war with Israel. The journalist Adrian Ash said in November 10th, 2010, gold does not change in nature. De Gaulle reminded the world in that 1965 speech, gold can be made either into bars, ingots, coins, has no nationality, is considered and in all places and at all times the immutable fiduciary value par excellence. How to collect and hoard this paragon of assets? Back in the 50s and 60s, world governments would simply keep up at the Fed, tap on the gold window and swap their unwanted dollars for gold. So that is exactly what de Gaulle did. Starting in 1958, he ordered the Bank of France to increase the rate at which it converted the new dollar reserves into bullion. In 1965 alone, he sent the French Navy across the Atlantic to pick up 150 million worth of gold. Come 1967, the proportion of French National Reserve held in gold had risen from 71 to 91.9%. The European average stood at merely 78.1% at that time. Compare this with the situation in Europe today. European nations are in debt and their coffer void of gold. The French President Charles de Gaulle saw the danger signs in the US dollar in the 1960s and backed his nation's wealth with true gold. He did not send a diplomat but the French Navy to demand for gold from the Fed. This was no longer possible by 1971 when President Nixon announced the unpegging of gold from the dollar. This gave rise to more than 50 years of uncontrolled, lawless printing by the United States. This began the Ponzi scheme to inflate away the wealth of the world. The price of gold is an indication of the fraudulent nature of paper currency. America fell from righteousness when gold was unpegged from the US dollar in 1971. So it began 50 years of printing dishonest money. What is the problem with this inordinate printing? Unrestrained printing of money results in the loss of stored value of paper money. This is called inflation. The value of the dollar erodes itself with time, and it has been 40 years or 50 years now for the US dollar. Today it has lost 95% of its value since the time when US dollar 20.67 was exchanged for 1 troy ounce of gold. The day of reckoning is coming near indeed. Today, the first world nations, like United States, Europe, Japan, that consume 60% of the world's GDP, are in great debt. These leading nations of the world, since the end of World War II in 1945, are suffering 65 years later, 75 years later, economically speaking, because they have lived wantonly, carelessly since 1971. In terms of the size of external debts, well, this one I have, it has ballooned, right? Here we said $14 trillion, 2010. 94 today, 3 months. In 3 months, it's printed $1 trillion. 3 months, $1 trillion. So we are living in the biggest debt bubble in the history of our world. The world debt is in trillions of dollars, and you may ask, how much is 1 trillion? It is 1 million times a million. If you had gone into business on the day that Jesus was born and your business lost $1 million a day, day in, day out, 365 days a year, it would take you until October 2737 to lose 1 trillion. Estimated a Christian economist as a warning to the world about following the precarious ways of these first world nations in the book, America for Sale. Do you know how much gold is available for men today? With men today, 150,000 tons. If you put them together, they only occupy the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Do you know how much does $1 trillion occupy? Well, it also occupies an Olympic-sized swimming pool if you stack the $100 US notes to the height of a man. Well, the UK is in debt. Germany, France, Netherlands, Spain, Italy, Japan, Greece. That is enslavement. It's an obligation to fulfill future labor. We have until now defined money as a unit measure of man's labor. We recall what is debt and what is savings. Debt is an obligation to provide human labor whereas savings is an accumulated or stored value of human labor. So the Bible says in Proverbs 22 verse 7, the rich ruleth over the poor, the borrower is servant to the lender. Borrowing lands a person in debt. He becomes a servant to the lender. Debt is an enslavement that binds a borrower in economic bondage as well as spiritual bondage. Matthew 6 verse 24, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will love the one and despise the other. He cannot serve God and mammon. Today, an average Singaporean who buys a house takes a 30-year-old loan, and he takes a 7-year loan if he buys a car. Then there is the monthly credit card repayment, servicing of study loans, renovation loans, hiring of furnitures, hire purchase of furnitures. This is the trap of the capitalist economy. One who holds a job can hardly sustain him in servicing his many debts. He is obliged to provide human labor in the years to come to repay his debts. Servicing these debts is indeed serving mammon. This is the modern man's enslavement. Fiat currency is creating an illusion of prosperity, making people. As a result of printing money, America has been able to create wealth by the cranking of the printing machine instead of providing goods and services by the labor of their hands. The Bible warns against this in Proverbs 23 verse 4 to 5. Labor not to be rich, cease from thy own wisdom. Wilt thou set thy eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. This world's prosperity today is created by debt. It is a make-believe prosperity, an illusion, a deception. And we are in the brink of an impending collapse of the fiat currency system. And, well, I pray that the people of God would be aware and be careful to get out of debt if there is. Verse 17 to 19, remembering Amalek. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way which ye were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, smote the hindermost of thee, and even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. And therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thy enemies round about, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. Although God demanded love for mankind, he did not with remote implication intend sentiment and weakness or neighbor expression, says O.T. Spence. He says, coming to the close of this discourse of laws, Moses needed to express upon the people that the fact of the craftiness of the enemy, the Amalekites. Exodus 17 verse 9 to 16. And Moses said to Joshua, choose out men, go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. When he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hand was heavy, and they took a stone and put under it and set, and Aaron and Hur stayed up his hand, one on this side and one the other side. And his hand was steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial and rehearse it in the years of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. They were treacherous as well, in that they would sneak upon Israel from the rear and attack the feeble when the entire camp of Israel were faint and weary. And notice the statement, thou shalt not forgive them. They were to completely blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Evil has to be taken out by the mercy of God. May the Lord help us.